Okay, ready for the second segment here. I've gotten in some parts. These really cool little 5-blade 4,500 RPM per volt motored ducted fans. They use the Outrunner motors, and we'll have plenty of really good thrust with these things. They are 64 millimeters. Looks like they're going to fit just exactly where I want them. They're going to be side by side. Kind of got them laid in there to show you. And I'm going to have to, what I always do when I'm building a plane is I'll put all the parts on the plane and just lay them in and try to get an idea of the CG, which I have not calculated yet. But I'll use the wing area here and calculate where the CG is, which is typically in a delta wing about right here. And then we'll have the batteries up front here, and we'll be able to balance these motors and battery to give us a CG that's in the center of lift. And then we've got a couple of Savox servos. These are very fast. They're 0.11 seconds from stop to stop. And I believe they're about 65 ounce inches of torque. And then I bought these ESCs. Look like pretty good ESCs. They have 60 ampere capability. And the battery has not arrived yet, but the battery I've chosen is a battery that's used on racing drones, and it will not provide a lot of flight time. But again, what I'm looking for is just pure speed out of this plane. And if I get a couple of minutes flight time and 2 or 3 fast passes, that's what I'm really looking for. Plane. I'm very pleased with how this came out. I've got the motors mounted very nicely in this midway. And so the next step here is going to be to mount the servos and cut the box out for the rear and do the vertical fins. Okay, we are ready for another look at this. I've done quite a bit of work on the plane since we last looked at it, so let me kind of go over here. What we're going to do is place these ESCs, one for each motor, and they are going to go where I've got them shown here, and the reason being that the wires of the motors here will come across, and there has to be enough space here. We're going to attach the wires. These are going to come down. So the wires are going to come through the center between the two ducted fans, and therefore these have to go close together. Probably leave a little space between them, something like that. So that's where those are going to go. Now let me talk about some of the stuff I've done here since the last time. I've mounted these carbon fiber rods, 2 of them on the sides here, because there's very little meat in this area here. So I had to support that clear to the back. And then on the bottom side here, we have an arrangement where I have a carbon fiber rod across here to give it good support this direction, and a couple of more back this way to give it support from this point into the center. And finally, I will add a single carbon rod going straight up the bottom there, which I have not done yet. I've glued the motors in. I glued them all around in every possible place I can glue them because the forces here are pretty big. And then I want to show this. This is something that was quite arduous, to say the least, to do. But what I've done is I have built a piece of aluminum. If you can see that, it's a square rod. And I'm talking about, let me point it out here. I'm talking about the square rod that we see here. This guy, this square rod here. And I've put some holes in it and mounted a tapped hole which goes through here, and you can see the cap screw Let me show you the other one, might be easier to see. Here it is. This is a better view here, I think. Get that where we can see it. And so we have a cap screw right here that captures the rod that comes through here. So this is pretty cool because what happens is the rod itself is what is both holding the flying wing, it's holding it as a bearing through the carbon fiber, and it's also using it as the torque connection, which will actually move the wing, if you can see that. And so it's all done in one system. And what that does for us is it causes us to, disallows any servos being viewed from the outside. So when we see the plane, we will see just the flying wing only, without a servo attached to the wing. I have also increased the length of the plane here to give it more of a, I guess you could say, aesthetic look. So you can see that the nose here has been increased, and I placed this on the bottom also because this will act as an airfoil, providing lift upward. And you can see how, if you look at the edge here, we've got two pieces, and the piece that I've added on the top is a similar shape as the top wing, and actually it's parallel in the rear. So this section here is parallel with this. It doesn't look like it from the picture, but it really is parallel. But then the front is inset slightly, as you can see that. See the inset top right there on the front end. It's inset. And what this will do is it acts as an airfoil. It's called a stepped airfoil. And I decided to do this instead of trying to cut foam. I think this will work just as well. Then the other thing I've done is I have cut out a top box piece here. So this piece has beveled sides here. So you can see there's an angle. See that angle on the sides right there, if you can see it. It's angled in on both of these edges in order to match up with the angled V-tail. And this will become the box that goes right across here and fits in nicely there and gets glued. And then the exit for this will be square in the back, a rectangular on both the bottom and the top. So I have the ESCs now laid out in the position I like them. I've kind of cut out a little bit of a vertical profile there. You can see a piece that's going to come back like that. I've got the top fitted in here about where I want it. Also, I have the servos wired up and working into my receiver, and I'm using one I've used before here. Works well with my JR radio. I have the 12X radio, which I really like. So some of the receivers won't work with that, but this one works really well. It's the AR600. And I have the battery pack here positioned in the front. I have the CG figured out. Just basically have cut out a little indentation for that. And I'm thinking about cutting through another one of these here, possibly. Maybe not. I want to try to get the battery down a little lower. It seems to be a little high. I want the battery to be, closer, further down this way. So I'll probably end up cutting out those sections so it's just on one piece, and then I'm going to have a carbon fiber rod on the bottom that'll extend from the whole front here clear to the tail of the plane to give it some good stability there. Again, I've had this running now. Both motors are running. Looks like it's going to make a whole lot of thrust. I think that's about it. I have a big wiring group here. I've got my BEC connector from ITT. It's good for like 48 volts input and outputs 5 volts. So I'm not going to be using the ESC battery eliminator circuits at all because I do have 5 cells here, about 20 volts. So that tends to, you get up high in voltage, these linear regulators that are in these typical ESCs of this size will get pretty warm because they're linear devices. And so this thing's a switching device, and it really works well. I've used it. This is used on planes up to, like, 48 volt input. So the 20 volts will be fine with that. Let's see what else. I have positioned the flying wings here so that they're working really nicely as far as the servo linkages. I got to get them in next, get the servos glued, and they're going to go in on the bottom of the plane. I had a little issue with these system here. That the system I've chosen here is fairly thin walled, so you can see how thin the walls are on those ducted fans, and they tend to squash if you're not careful, and the blades, which are already low tolerance, will rub a little bit on the sides of that, which we do not want. So I've tended to, when I put these in here and glued them very tightly here with the foam, it sort of deformed these into like an oval. So that oval was causing it to rub. So I've cut out all this material in the middle. What I'll end up doing is just connecting those two tabs that you see, the black tabs on the motors. I'm going to connect those together with probably a piece of small plywood, and I think I'm just going to leave them open like that because they are captured really well here, I think, all around the front. I've got glue around the front there on the edge and on the side on one tab, and I think that'll probably do it so as to not connect it to the foam in the middle. It gives it some breathing room there so that they will not deform. So that's about it. I'm getting ready to put in the box here too, building in that here. So it's going to kind of be like this and position itself like that. And I've kind of decided that I'm not going to duct anything up here. I've seen some of these foamies that don't have any ducts at all. I saw one video of a guy that had a completely flat single piece of foam he cut out and basically put his motor right here, and the thing worked beautifully without an airfoil at all. So I have good confidence that this airfoil that I've chosen, as I've shown here before, will be more than enough to cause the lift to be correct. And I'm thinking about maybe building in one more airfoil here that will be a triangle piece about this wide, that'll come out kind of to a point right there to sort of increase the airfoil depth here in the center, and then not do anything with this. So to give it more of a sloped up airfoil, which is typically what we find in these flying fuse kind of planes. Then on the bottom, which I haven't really worked on yet, I'm turning this thing over and I'll put another one of these, maybe a couple of them, up to the motors because they have to hit the ground when this thing comes in. And this is my soldering iron from the other side. Check this thing out. This will solder anything. Look at the size of that thing. So I've been doing all the soldering. I've got the soldering finish, as I said. I have ran this thing up. Still haven't held it up like I want to see how the thrust is, but that's coming up in the next video. And I'm confident that this thing will absolutely have more thrust than its weight by at least 2 times. It's going to be really amazing. All right, stay tuned. Looks like it's coming along beautifully. Pretty soon I'll be flying this for you.